In this video, I will discuss a bit what is a unit vector. I will discuss a bit what are the properties of unit vectors and why we use them. Let's say for example that I have a unit vector that I call A. This is my unit vector. Now, a very important property of unit vectors is that they always have a magnitude of 1. So if you ever calculate the magnitude of a unit vector and you find that to be anything other than 1, then something is wrong with the calculations. Now, the reason why we use unit vectors is the following. Vectors have two properties: the direction, so they point towards some direction, and they also have a magnitude. The length of the arrow is telling you what is the magnitude of the vector A. Now, since vectors have two properties, the direction and the magnitude, and unit vectors always have a magnitude of 1, then the reason why we use them is to indicate a direction. So if you want, unit vectors are useful to indicate direction. Now, let's say, for example, that I have a vector that points in the positive x direction. So let's say that I have vector b, and vector b is, for example, 5, 0, 0. This vector points in the positive x direction, and the y and z components are 0. Could this possibly be a unit vector? No, because the x component is 5 and the magnitude of b is greater than 1. So how can I get a unit vector that points in the positive x direction? So the unit vector would have to point in the positive x direction. So it will have to have a positive x component. Now, I know, since the vector points in the positive x direction, that this has to be 0, and the z component will also have to be 0. So only the x component is positive, and the magnitude of this unit vector has to be 1. This means that your x component has to be plus 1. This unit vector that points in the same direction as vector b will have to be 1, 0, 0. And this is a unit vector that indicates the direction of vector b. Both of them point in the same direction. The difference is that the unit vector c hat has a magnitude of 1, whereas the vector b has a magnitude of 5. Now, how can I find a unit vector that points in, let's say, the positive y direction? Let's call this one d hat. So if you want to find d hat, I know that the x component of this unit vector will have to be 0, and the z component of this unit vector will also have to be 0. Now, since this is a unit vector, the magnitude of this one will have to be 1. So here, since this unit vector points in the positive y direction, I need to have plus 1 for the y component. 0 in the x, positive 1 in the y, and 0 in the z. This is the unit vector, that d hat, that points in the positive y direction.